Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to New York City. My name is Dena, and I'm going to be your tour guide today. We're going to explore the oldest part of the island of Manhattan, dating back about 400 years, which I realize for those of you visiting us from European countries, that's like no big deal. But in the United States, that's pretty much as old as things get. We're going to explore areas that you've heard of, things you haven't heard of. We're going to explore areas that have crime, corruption, and wonderful history, and also some things that aren't as pleasant and aren't as peaceful. I'm going to take you around beautiful parks, narrow streets, tall buildings, but of course we're only going to be at the bottom of them, and even a little bit underground perhaps. Right now we're standing in Bowling Green Park. This is the original tip of the island of Manhattan. I say original because over the last 200 years, so much excavating and landfill has actually made the island bigger in this direction than it was when it began. This was the bottom of the island, this was the tip, but it actually now extends further that way, and we're going to head that way soon. Right here on this site was the Fort Amsterdam. That was built by the Dutch in the 1600s to defend the island mostly against the British, because we didn't really like the British, but we also didn't really like the Dutch. They were at each other's throats for a long time. It started in 1609. Henry Hudson sailed up the river looking for the Northwest Passage to Asia, which he never found because it doesn't exist. Instead, he found this land rich with resources, and particularly beaver pelts that were very popular in Europe. When he realized he wasn't going to make it to Asia, he went back home, and the Dutch sent over a colony. Started here in 1624. They called it New Amsterdam because no one likes to come up with a new name when you can take an old name and put new in front of it. But then in the 70s, 1670s that is, the British took it from them, 1673, and they called it New York. But the Dutch weren't so happy with that, so they took it back in 1674 and called it New Orange because New Amsterdam was so old school. But then the Dutch and the British decided, okay, let's make a deal. We're going to give you our island in the South American country of Suriname, and you can have New York. And the English said, all right, and in 1674 they moved back in and called it New York. It wasn't until 1776, 100 years later, that the Declaration of Independence was signed, and the British didn't actually leave this country until 1783. Of course, they and the French came back in the 1800s, but we'll get to that later. The fort that was here was demolished, and this building was built in 1907 as a U.S. Customs House. Why? Because so much of the shipping that entered the United States came right through the port that's on the other side of this building. This building was designed by Cass Gilbert, the man whose most famous building is actually going to be later on our tour. The figures here represent the only significant 4 continents in the world at the time, designed by Daniel Chester French, the same man whose most famous statue is that of Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Now, we're going to walk around the island and walk around this park so you can see some of the better sights to be seen around here. But keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we are a large group. It is important that we stay together. Keep a lookout for the fancy thing that I'm holding in my hand here that will help you find me. But also try and stay close. We are going to be crossing streets, we are going to be walking through mobs of people, some of whom are people who actually work and live around here and think they're very important, even though most of them aren't. You don't want to get in their way. We're going to be heading up across Broadway, and then we're going to get you're going to have an opportunity to take beautiful pictures of this building and Bowling Green Park. But make sure you stay together and try not to get lost.